Are you considering partnering with another business with your bar in order to try to cross promote or raise revenue? Well, today we're going to be breaking down the three essential questions that can predict partnership success, the simple ROI calculation that reveals the true profit potential, and generally diving into what you should consider when you're thinking about creating a partner relationship with another business to help cross promote or do anything else. Hello and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. In this episode of the Bar Business Podcast, we're diving into partnership revenue evaluation, and we're going to focus on a three-question framework that can help you prevent mistakes and identify profitable collaboration opportunities. So one thing that's become really big nowadays is collaboration, right? Working with other people around you to raise revenue, to increase your profits, to help cross promote, to share marketing. But the thing is, a lot of these sound great in theory, but they fail to deliver the actual revenue or results that you're looking for. And they fail because you don't properly evaluate the structure up front. We get excited about a new potential, we shake hands on a deal, and then we're wondering where the return is. So the difference between a partnership that works well and a partnership that doesn't work is not luck. It's not trustworthiness. It's not how much you like the person or the business on the other side of that deal. It is a systematic method for evaluating the deal. So we're going to talk about the exact framework that you should use to separate a profitable collaboration from one that's just a waste of time. So why do most bar collaborations fail financially? Well, there's a couple reasons, but the big one is there's no financial projections, there's no financial target, there's no actual metrics or KPIs put around this collaboration, this partnership. And some of that is just because we assume that other people have our best interests in heart when we make a deal with them, or we make assumptions of what the other person is going to do, the other business is going to do in a collaboration. And some of that is that we fail to take into account all the variables that we need to in order to create a successful collaboration. When you don't have clearly defined success metrics, your partnership's just going to drift along without any measurable real results. And I am all for doing agreements on a handshake, right? I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast before, but the house that I'm sitting in now, where my office is, the whole house was built on handshakes and no formal contracts. I am not a big fan of formal contracts, but unless you document what people's roles and responsibilities are, how that partnership is supposed to work, what the guidelines are for your collaboration, it's going to be really hard to hold the other person accountable. So yeah, you can do a lot of things on handshakes, but you also need to make sure that you've had the good conversations, you've had the agreements, and preferably document some of those expectations. The other thing that can hurt you when you're looking to collaborate with people is that you're just choosing the wrong person to collaborate or the wrong type of collaboration. You know, one of the big things now is always social media collaboration. Is that great? Does that work for some bars? Absolutely. Are there bars that have been absolutely buried because they chose the wrong person, the wrong influencer to collaborate with? Absolutely. So make sure that everyone is clear on what you're doing and how you're going to measure the success. Because without that, you're not going to have a good collaboration, a good partnership to help promote your business. But there are three critical questions that I would encourage all of you to ask when you're looking at collaborating with someone, whether that's an individual, an influencer, another business, to help promote your own or to do anything within your business. First question, what specific revenue will this partnership generate? Specific revenue. And to say specific revenue, now we need specific triggers, specific data that's going to support that so that it's measurable. Vague promises of things like more customers or increased exposure, you can't take to the bank. You can't measure it, right? If I say, oh yeah, join my program, I'm going to increase the exposure of your bar, and I mention your bar, right? If I say, well, Jimmy's bar, blah, on this podcast, well, yeah, that's going to increase your exposure because you're going to be exposed to a bunch of people that wouldn't otherwise have heard you. But now, if your bar's in Wisconsin, and I know I have a really loyal listener in Bermuda, the fact that I increased your exposure of your bar in Wisconsin to some guy in Bermuda, is that really helping you? No. Did I increase your exposure? Yes. But that guy in Bermuda, I know he listens every week. No clue who it is, but I know I do have a guy in Bermuda that listens every week. That guy in Bermuda probably ain't ever going to go to your bar in Wisconsin. So I have given you more exposure, but it's not meaningful exposure. So you need to know what specific revenue you will generate and how you're going to measure it. The second question you should ask in any collaboration: what is my total time investment to launch and maintain this partnership? And is this partnership equal? Right? Sometimes you're going to have collaboration partnerships that are unequal, and that's perfectly okay as long as you know that going into it. But measure and understand the time it's going to take you to maintain this partnership, to execute on this collaboration, and then make sure you have the time to actually do it. And the same goes for the person that you're partnering with. They need to understand their time commitment and make sure they have the time to do it. The third question I want you to answer: can this partnership work without me being personally involved every day? I mean, that's kind of asking the same question of time commitment, but a lot of times, if you have to be involved every day, that's not a sustainable infrastructure, especially for a bar owner, because you know you're going to get pulled left and right constantly. You know that expecting yourself to do something every day probably isn't going to happen. So understand the commitments, the revenue, have measurable, understandable KPIs that both you and the person you're partnering with, collaborating with, can agree upon. Now, when we start talking about this, what are some red flags to these potential questions? Well, mutual promotion, it doesn't mean much. Increased brand awareness, doesn't mean much. Community building, doesn't mean much. So any of those kind of vague, fluffy, fun terms, and I use them a lot, right? Your culture matters. You need to get buy-in on your culture. That's all vague, but we can assign KPIs there. We can find ways to measure it. So always make sure when you're doing a collaboration, it's not based on those vague things. I mean, we can say, okay, our goal is increased brand awareness. That's a perfectly okay goal. But then define increased brand awareness. Give it some measurable KPIs to make that collaboration actually work so that you can actually understand if it worked. Now, how do we determine the ROI on a collaboration or a partnership? And this can be very difficult, but there's a formula we can go to. Expected annual collaboration or partnership revenue minus annual time involvement cost divided by total setup investment. So what are we talking here? Time, so what you expect to make, revenue minus the cost of time divided by setup cost. So to give you a really quick example, let's say that you get into a partnership with someone, you're going to do a marketing collaboration, and you think that'll bring you in $30,000 a year in additional revenue. And it's going to take you 100 hours of setup and 4 hours a month to maintain it. So how are we going to do this math? We're going to take 30,000. I'm sorry, actually, let me back up here a second. The 4 months of the 4 hours of monthly maintenance and the setup, let's say that. So in our formula, we have three variables: revenue, time cost, and setup. So how are we going to determine these? Well, revenue is pretty easy, right? If I think my collaboration should make me $30,000 this year, that's $30,000. Now, how do I figure out my annual time cost and my setup investment? Well, I'm going to look at my hours, right? How many hours am I putting in this? How many hours is my team putting in this? Now, if I have a bartender that makes $10 an hour doing this, well, it's pretty easy. I take however many hours the bartender has to do, I multiply that by 10. What about for yourself? Well, one thing that I think as an owner you should always have in mind is, what is your hourly rate? So let's just say we said it was $100 an hour. And so we know that this collaboration should bring us $30,000 in revenue. We think it's going to take us about 10 hours to set it up and about 5 hours a month. Well, 5 hours a month ends up being 60 hours a year. 60 hours a year, 60 times 100 would be 6,000. So we think it's going to bring in $30,000. Our time on a monthly basis is $6,000. Or on an annual basis, our time is worth $6,000. 30,000 minus 6,000 gives us $24,000. So that's the top part of our equation, right? Remember, our equation is partnership revenue minus time investment cost, or annual time investment cost, divided by total investment setup. Let's say that total setup was 10 hours. 10 hours times 1,000 or 100 is 1,000. And so we're going to take that total that we came up with a second ago, which was 22,000. This doesn't make any sense at all. All right. So once you've laid out the framework for your partnership, for your collaboration, now we want to calculate the ROI. And the ROI calculation here is pretty simple. It's going to be expected annual partnership revenue minus annual time investment cost divided by total setup investment, or total investment. So annual revenue minus annual cost divided by total investment to set it up. And that's going to give you a percentage. It'll give you a percentage over 100, hopefully. And what we're really looking here is to see a 300% or higher ROI annually to justify the relationship, to justify this collaboration. So again, expected annual revenue minus annual time investment cost divided by all of that, divided by total setup investment. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you determined your time was worth $50 an hour, which is a relatively fair assumption as a bar owner. If we're thinking that you're a higher level bar manager, $50 an hour is an all right number to work with. So we're going to take, okay, what is our expected revenue from this partnership for the first year? Let's say that's $30,000. And let's say that our time every month is 4 hours, and that our total time to set this up is 100 hours, let's say. So the first thing we have to figure out is what is the top part of our division problem, our numerator, and that's going to be expected annual partnership revenue minus annual time investment cost. So we already said that our revenue is 30,000, and we think that our annual time investment cost is going to be about 4 hours a month, which means there's 12 months in a year. So that's 48 hours a year at $50 an hour. That's $2,400 a year. So we take 30,000 minus 2,400, and that will give us 27,600. And so we have 27,600. Now, what did that take us to set up? I said that it took us 100 hours to set it up. So we're going to divide that by 5,000. Right? 100 hours at $50 an hour is $5,000. So we take that number we determined before, that 27,600, we divide it by 5,000, and that's going to give us 5.52, or if we express that as a percentage, 552%. So using that math, a 552% ROI exceeds our 300% ROI goal, and that would be a good partnership. But again, do the math. And again, the equation is annual partnership revenue minus annual time investment cost as one factor, and then you divide that answer by the total setup investment. So to wrap us up here, we've covered why bar partnerships and collaborations sometimes fail financially. The 3 questions you need to ask in order to predict whether or not they can work, and the ROI calculation you can use for an objective evaluation of whether or not a collaboration makes sense. Remember that professional partnerships and collaborations, when we evaluate them, we're preventing costly mistakes. We're identifying the most profitable opportunities, and we're setting our bars up for success. The difference between a profitable partnership and one that wastes your time comes down to systematic evaluation of that partnership and making sure that you're laying out the framework, the ground rules, which both parties will follow. So don't let an excitement about any potential collaboration cloud your business judgment. Use the framework we've talked about today to make objective decisions that will drive your business to greater success in the future. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.